Okay, let's start. You're online. I see you.
Excellent. All right. So we're live now.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Rebecca Perez, and I'm an animator. Been animating for over 10 years, close to 20 years in the industry. I started off by going to Ringling, and I got a degree in animation. When I was done at Ringling and graduated, I was fortunate enough to get hired at LucasArts. It's the gaming division for Star Wars and George Lucas. I worked on countless Star Wars video games. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold. Worked there for about 7 years. Progressed from when I first started, I was an art technician, which is a very basic level artist at the studio. By the time I graduated, well, by the time I completed my 7 years, I was a lead animator on the Republic Commando games. After that, I moved down to Los Angeles and started working at EA. I worked on one Medal of Honor game before I decided I really needed to refocus on my demo reel to be able to move into feature animation quality work. That's when I decided to sort of stop working and really focus on recreating a reel. I decided at the time there was a small school who had just started up called Animation Mentor. I was in the very first class, and I was really, really lucky enough to get Victor DeVoe, which is a Pixar animator, and I'm sure most of you know, as one of my very first mentors. In that class, I learned so much about animation and the passion behind it. I actually really fell in love with animating. And so instead of really focusing on where I would end up, I started focusing on the art form of animation. And again, I fell in love with it, decided to continue my studies. And around third semester, I had another amazing mentor called Jason Ryan. And Jason was working at Disney at the time. And luckily enough, he tapped me on the shoulder and asked me if I was interested in animating at Disney. So, of course, without hesitation, I said absolutely. Although I was really torn because I really loved learning about animation and really was enjoying the journey of taking classes and really studying under master animators. But again, getting hired at Disney or the opportunity of working there meant that I would be mentored by industry professionals at that high level feature animation. So of course, hands down, I decided to take the opportunity, and I became an assistant animator on Meet the Robinsons. My very first feature, working with Disney animators that I had looked up to for years and years. I'd studied their work and read their books, so I was mesmerized by everything there. I worked there for about 3 years on both Meet the Robinsons and Bolt before I moved on to Sony. And at Sony, well, I worked a little bit at Rhythm and Hughes on the Alvin movie and on Horton at Blue Sky for a short period of time. And then I was really lucky enough to get hired at Sony to work on Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. And that was by far probably one of my most favorite experiences. I learned an immense amount from the guys next to me, and we were working with directors Chris and Phil, who were really open to suggestions from the animators in the animation department, which was something I hadn't quite experienced up to that point. So it was really exciting to be able to put in my own input and have it be received so well. So I felt like I really grew and spread my wings at that studio. And then I moved on to DreamWorks. And then I was at DreamWorks for about 4 years, and I worked on How to Train Your Dragon, the original. Worked on Kung Fu Panda 2, Megamind, let's see, and then some smaller short films at the studio. And then I completed my work on Turbo. Turbo was the last one I worked on. And then I decided to take a short break in between, start a family, devote myself to really kind of sharing the knowledge I learned with my community, the animation community, and that's when I decided to pair up with Jaleel and Vadim and create CGTarian, and really focus on kind of giving back to the community and sharing the knowledge that I had learned at all these major studios. I had always felt so fortunate to be able to learn online, and I felt like I got so many opportunities that I never would have been able to have had it not been for the internet and for sort of this day and age of being able to be connected to people around the world. So I really felt strongly that I wanted to share that with sort of the next generation. And I felt, so did we all in the school, we felt that there was a sort of gap in learning as far as students who have already taken classes but really needed to focus on one discipline, or really wanted to take just an acting class, or their skills in motor and mechanics weren't necessarily as high or developed as they should be. So that's when we started to really focus on CGTarian, developing these classes sort of on a la carte kind of way, where everybody can choose to come to the school and pick the class that they really needed to focus on in order to develop their reel, to get into a feature studio, or even get into just an animation studio in general. So after that, now I am currently working at Real Effects in Santa Monica, and I'm working on my 11th feature film. It's called Scooby-Doo, and it's a whole new remake, completely 3D, excuse me, completely 3D, all 3D characters. There's no live action in it. Very stylized characters and very cartoony animation a la Tom and Jerry, and also very similar to perhaps the cartoony class that David Stodolny teaches. So that's where I'm currently at now, and now we're just doing this Q&A, kind of sharing some information. So if anybody has any questions they want to ask away. I think Vadim is typing. Maybe he's not. I think he is. I'll continue talking. While he's typing, I guess I'll share a few kind of thoughts that I have in animation and things I share with students when they come into my class. I'm a big advocate that anybody can be an animator, but not everyone can be successful. But what I mean by that is you really have to be successful in this industry, you really have to focus and dedicate the time that is needed in order to develop your skills. So before I continue with that one, let me take a look. Can you please tell us a little bit about your course and what we can learn there, and what requirements we should meet to take it? Okay, well, my course is what I would consider an advanced basics course. It's more advanced than the 12 principles of just the basic ball bounce and overlapping pendulum and things like that. My class is taking, oh, hold on one second. What if you would need to choose 3 or 4 most important animation principles? What would you choose? Okay, well, we'll follow up with those next questions. I'll focus on what my class is about and what the requirements are in order to take it. So as I was saying, my class is more advanced basics class. It actually takes all the principles, the 12 principles that you would learn in a basic ball bounce and pendulum swing and things like that, and we apply it to a biped character. So we begin our course by a basic walk cycle and posing characters, which is really the foundation to really any animation that you do. When you create a walk cycle, for example, it is deceivingly simple. When someone says to you, do a walk cycle, I still know professional animators that have been doing it for years that have a difficult time doing a walk cycle. And that's simply because they're so specific. Everybody knows what a cycle is supposed to look like, whether you're an animator or just someone, you know, an accountant or someone who works at a bank, like, you know what that looks like. So in order to create that believably in CG or animation, it takes a lot of skill, a lot of dedication, a lot of breaking down of sort of those elements as far as the 12 principles are concerned. So what we do in our class is focus on taking those 12 principles and applying it to the mechanics and the movement of a character, not necessarily the performance. I try and strip that away from my class because I've always found that, especially students, they sort of get lost in trying to create a story behind whatever animation they're working on. And when you're doing the beginning, the basics, the root and the foundation of learning these principles and how to apply them to a biped or a human character, students lose sight when you start adding, hey, add a performance on top of this. So I try and strip that away in my class and just focus on the movement, on the motion and the mechanics, and making sure that your weight and weight distribution and shifting of weight, your overlap, your timing, your spacing, your arcs, all those things are applied to your animation, to the movement. And then in the following class, you can work on layering on a performance. I've always found, and the reason I developed my class specifically, Characters in Motion, Intro to Body Mechanics, the reason I focused on body mechanics is just that I began my career at LucasArts as an animator in games, and we focused a lot on the mechanics, the movement of a character, not necessarily the performance. And I found time and time again, a lot of students just want to jump into the character side. They want to add a performance. They just want to do an acting shot. But I consider it, I sort of describe my class as the roots of a tree, right? If you plant a seed, you water it, and the roots come out, and all of a sudden you'll see the tree coming out. Now, my class is the roots of the tree. If you have really strong roots and you've developed those skills and they almost come as second nature, that tree is going to grow and you'll be able to develop leaves and branches. The branches and the leaves are the acting, the performance on top of an animation. So without the bottom, without that foundation, without the roots of your study and your education, you will not be able to have a believable acting performance on an animation. You'll be able to act it out, but your mechanics, everything will look wrong, and you'll lose an audience. So my class really focuses on developing that foundation so that then you can work on performance on top of that, which is extremely important. You can't have a great performance without strong mechanics. So that's what you would get in my class. As far as requirements, I would really recommend that you take, or at least have, a really strong grasp of basic fundamental principles. So the 12 principles that you would normally find in a basic class of just a ball bounce, an overlap assignment, a pendulum assignment, things of that nature. I really would require you to have that in order to take my class. Because if you jump into my class without really understanding those principles and applying them in a basic object like a ball, then it's going to be really difficult to apply that to a bipedal character, a human character actually moving in space. So that's really important. What would you need to choose? 3 of the most important animation principles. What would you choose? 3 to 4. That's kind of, I don't think I can choose 3 or 4. They're all really, really important in order to tell a story. It's hard. I really couldn't choose 3 or 4. You really need to apply all 12 principles. There needs to be appeal. There needs to be overlap. There needs to be strong timing. You need to add proper spacing. You need to track your arcs. You need to have squash and stretch. You have to have all those aspects, all those principles in an animation in order to make them work. You can layer things on. And so first I would focus on my timing and strong posing and appeal in those poses. I would layer then on, overlap, squash and stretch aspects of that onto the animation. But I would never not add one or think that one was more important than the other. How do you avoid floaty animation when we move from blocking to splining? That's a really good question. I've actually, yeah, that's probably the most difficult part of what I found animating any shot. And that goes for professional animators as well as junior animators or students of animation. The way I found is one of the best ways that I've gotten around that is when I do keyframe an animation. Let's say I have a 10 frame animation, right? And you have a key at frame 1, a key at frame 5, and a key at frame 10. Now, the keys in between there, in between the 1 to 5 and then the 5 to 10, those keys in between are going to be very swimmy when you just spline it out. So what I end up doing, right, when you have something that looks like that, I'll take my key 1 and I'll copy that exact key and I'll bring it out to frame 3. So somewhere in between the 2 frames that I have existing. And then the same thing goes from frame 5 to frame 10. I do somewhere in between it, grab my frame 5 and I copy it to my frame 8. So now what I have is a key at frame 1, 3, 5, 8, and 10. But my key 1 and 3 are identical. So that sort of holds my pose. And then from frame 3 to 5, those kind of interpolate. So I'm giving it less frames to go from one action to the next. And that's sort of a good way for me to kind of hold my poses when I go from just stepped to spline. Then I'll go in and sort of polish or adjust my keyframe 3 because you don't want, obviously, 1 and 3 to be identical. And that's sort of how I try and avoid that swimmy feel when I'm going from blocking to spline. Is it better to work in big studio, small studio, or as a freelancer? Can you tell us your thoughts from your experience? Can you compare it, pros and cons? There's pros and cons to every one of them, absolutely. I've worked at all of them, actually. I've done a smaller studio, I've done a larger studios, and I've been a freelancer. The pro to a larger studio is that you really do get exposed to top talent in the industry. The people at these larger studios are the best. So you can really learn and absorb and really get, really polish your skills if you tap into that. And that's really rewarding, and it's hard to find in a smaller studio because smaller studios obviously have fewer people. You may have 1 or 2 that are really phenomenal animators that you can find that you can really grow from. But in a larger studio, you do get like the Glenn Keanes and you know, and those types of animators that have been doing it for ages. The Dale Bears, who were trained by the 9 Men, like those guys exist in these larger studios, not necessarily in the smaller studios. However, when you work in a smaller studio, it's really nice because you do get a lot more opportunity because there aren't a lot of senior people. They're generally fewer senior people. So the junior people will get an opportunity to work on shots on a film that you would probably never have the opportunity to do in a larger studio because there's so many senior people that will take really great shots because they're more qualified to take them. In a smaller studio, the opportunity is more available to you. If you can prove yourself as someone who can handle a larger shot, they'll be able to like kind of trust you and give you a chance. So smaller studio is more valuable in that sense. And then as far as freelancing, freelancing is fun because you're sort of on your own terms. Like you can come and go as you please. Some of the times you can work from home, so that's really nice because, you know, some people are evening people, or night people. Some people are morning people. So you can really work on your time, right? As long as you meet your meetings and meet your schedule, you can work at 2 a.m. whereas opposed to a major studio, or even a smaller studio, they would expect you to be there from a 9 to 5, 9 to 6, or at that specific schedule, and you'd be able to really focus on just those time frames. So being a freelancer, it gives you the opportunity to be more flexible with your time. But the con to being a freelancer is most of the time you're working sort of in a bubble. You're working on your own, or you're working on your own for a majority of the time. And by the time you show your work, you may be far into it, and to course correct animations, far into the process. As you guys, students, know, it's really hard if you're like in the final week of an assignment and you show your work and all of a sudden they're like, no, change it, do it like this. Then it's pretty much like starting over. You've lost 2 weeks of work, or whatever the case may be. So as a freelancer, it's hard in that sense. You're working in a bubble, so you really have to sort of be actively tapping people on the shoulder, or contacting the studio, or talking to friends to kind of give you feedback on your work. So again, I'd almost suggest as a freelancer, you may want to wait to be a little more seasoned, not necessarily a student, to do that. Let's see, is there a magic formula to become a good animator? Excuse me. Another really good question. There is no magic formula. There is no magic button. The formula is hard work and time. It takes time to really focus and work on an animation in order to polish it and make it sort of at the level it needs to be. So I always talk about this sort of example. I wonder if this guy will watch this, but one of my best friends, his name is Dave Harden. He's a phenomenal animator. I met him at Cloudy, and I worked with him. He was actually my cube mate at DreamWorks for 4 years. Phenomenal animator. He's been nominated for an Annie. Very humble, very kind person, very open to notes and to giving you notes. He's fantastic. So long story short, I've always admired his work, and he's fast, and he always delivers amazing animations. And I always thought in my mind, and this guy is just, he's really gifted. It comes easy to him. Like he's a natural animator. Wow, what's his secret? And then I remember, obviously we're friends now, and we've become like best friends. And I started asking him, so what's your secret? Like, how do you do this? Like, how can you come up with such amazing work? And he looked at me and he was like, that's an illusion. You think it's coming easy, but this particular shot, whatever he was working on at the time, this has taken me like a week to block out, and I've blocked it out 3 times. And I've shown it to a few people, but I've actually recorded reference 6 times. And I worked on it until midnight every night. That's the part that I don't see, right? As sort of the outsider, all I'm seeing is what he shows, and I didn't see his process. And he exposed it. He basically said, no, this is really, really hard for me. But the thing is, I work on it. I do it, and then I redo it. And then if it's still not working, I redo it again. And then I work the hours I need to put into this in order to make it sort of at a highest level possible in order to show it to the director or the anim soup. So whereas I thought, oh, all he did was just like, hit the animate button or something like that, he said it was super difficult for him to do. And here is someone who is at the top of his game. If you're animated for an Annie, I don't know if you guys are aware of Annies, but Annies are the equivalent of an Oscar in the animation industry. So here's someone who's at the top of his game, who's amazing. I've looked up to his work, and I thought it came easy to him. He said it doesn't. So I'm convinced it does not come easy. It doesn't come easy to me. It's what it is just focusing on creating it, on being there and doing the work. If you open up Maya or whatever software you're using to animate, it's not about, oh, okay, I opened up Maya, I opened up my file. I wonder what's up at Facebook. Let me open my Facebook. Or, did anyone send me an email? Let me check my email. those are the distractions that take you away from really focusing on frame, like going frame by frame and cleaning up your arcs and focusing on every aspect of the animation, which eventually becomes very tedious, but it's that hard work that once you put it out there, people are like, wow, that looks amazing. That must have been easy to do. No, it wasn't. It wasn't easy. And it's not easy, but it's super rewarding. And that's why you sacrifice and put in all the hard work, because at the end you're like, awesome, like people are appreciating that, or people laughed, you know, or they cried, or they were moved in some way. So to answer that question, there's no easy magic button, there's no easy magic solution or one answer to creating good animation. It's hard work is the key and the secret, which isn't a big secret. It's sort of what everyone would probably tell you. Where do you get good ideas to stay away from cliches? Well, what I talk about in my class, and I do talk about cliches, and because we do one assignment, several assignments that we talk about posing a character based on an emotion that I'll give you, right? And oftentimes I'll say, oh, that's cliche, you know, let's stay away from that. So I try and explain what cliche actually means. Like once you understand what a cliche is, then it's a little bit easier to avoid it. So I describe a cliche as the first thing that comes to your mind, or the most common thing that would happen. So say I give you the word shocked, right? What's your first reaction to shocked? That's shocked, right? But that's a very cliche way of expressing shocked, the word shocked. Now, in order to avoid a cliche, which is just the obvious solution to a problem, what I try and think of is whatever that word is, whatever the expression is, whatever I'm trying to animate, I try and place it in a real world situation. So instead of, you know, just animating the word shocked, what I say is, where can I place that word that would make it original? So, or realistic in a real world situation. So how about you walked into the room and your husband is sleeping with another woman? How would you feel? You'd feel shocked. But what would actually be your emotion? Like, what would that look like? And so all of a sudden, what was just an arbitrary word, shocked, now has context. So placing your animation in context in a real world situation will give you the opportunity to create an animation that's not cliche, that's more original to the moment, right? And that's sort of how I try and avoid cliches in my own work. Can we get a discount code to your course? You know, discount codes do come up throughout the year. We never really have a set time or date for them. And we sometimes don't even put them out. So I hesitate to say, you know, there'll be a discount code. Those tend to come up, you know, when we feel like it's something that might benefit the community and increase sort of exposure to the class. So I can't really say one way or another that a discount code would be coming up anytime soon. What I can say is you will get the value of your money with my class and with any of the classes you take at CGTarian. Is reference important? And do you use reference a lot on every shot, or are there shots that you animate without reference? Both. I think as a student and as a junior animator, it's super important to record reference because the way I describe it is you're still sort of building a Rolodex, building a library of knowledge of animation, of movement. the longer you've been animating, then the more walk cycles you'll have done, the more reaction shots you'll have done, more performance shots you'll have done. So with every shot, you sort of build a library of knowledge. Okay, I did a a character sitting down on the chair. Got it. I learned something from that. Now I did a walk, a character coming into the room, and then he sits down. Well, that's 2 walks. So slowly but surely, after years of experience, you sort of build a library where you may not necessarily have to depend on video reference quite as much. So as you get more seasoned, you'll need it less. When you're less seasoned, you'll need it a lot more. And then it also depends on the show that you're on. Some directors are really heavily influenced by looking at video reference, and they're sort of sold on an idea earlier on than, say, you just blocking something out that might take you a full day to do, as opposed to just shooting video reference of yourself, and that might take you a half hour. So you can avoid sort of going in the wrong direction if you just shoot video reference up front, show it, and then move on. That's sort of how I use video reference. What would you recommend for animation practice? Well, that would depend on where you are in your career, or how advanced of an animator or beginner animator you are. If you're a beginner animator, if you're a student, I'd really focus on, again, my mechanics, like developing the mechanics underlying a performance, and then practice on just basic assignments like a ball pitch, or a character walking and then coming to a stop, or a character running, things like that, like smaller, manageable assignments can kind of keep your skills up and continue to develop your animation, skills. And then the more advanced you are, you may want to, brush up on creating stronger performances, and not such cliche things, not the first thing that comes into your mind. And then the next level is sort of taking, for example, David Stodolny's Cartoony class, which is a fun class, and not many studios are working on cartoony Tom and Jerry type of animations, but it's always fun to do. It's the reason most of us got into animation in the first place, because we like to animate. We like to create something that doesn't exist in real life, and that the epitome of that is sort of the Ichabod Crane, the Tom and Jerry's, and that sort of world. Again, going back to like what I'd be working on now at Real Effects, which is Scooby-Doo, it's going to be a very heavily sort of animator movie, in the sense that a class like David's would really be useful, and useful knowledge to apply to this show. We're going to really be cartoony with it. So that's sort of my advice as far as what you should maybe do in order to build your skills. How to create less realistic animation and more cartoony one? Well, that sort of is along the same lines. Extremely exaggerated, goofy, and fun. How to come up with those ideas if it's not possible to film yourself? Good question. And that sort of leads me back to David's class, which is a really fantastic class to take if you want to develop that skill. Now, as someone who hasn't worked on a show yet that is that cartoony, what I would say is, as you develop your skills in animation, obviously there's some things you can't video record, but there's so much out there, like, again, the Tom and Jerry's, the Ichabod Cranes, the new Mickey Mouse shorts that have recently come out. If you look some of the old Disney movies, even like, oh gosh, now they're slipping my mind, but even like Little Mermaid, if you look at specific shots, they're very cartoony, very animated. Emperor's New Groove was one of them. They're very goofy, oh, some of the Goofy shorts. Like they did a recent release of the shorts at Disney, and there's one that's called the Goofy shorts. And that one's so over the top animation that what I would do is reference those. Those would be what I would keyframe through to kind of figure out how an animator decided to do this cartoony movement. And then I would stylize that. I would use that as sort of reference, in a sense, to guide myself to whatever movement or motion that I'm creating currently in a cartoony shot. But if you do want to know more specifics and more details and want to actually work on something like that, then take David's class, because that really is going to show you and expose you to what the tips and tricks are to creating that sort of cartoony, over the top, exaggerated, fun animation. All right. How many narrow divisions of labor in large and small studios? For example, I'm working as a 3D generalist in character animation. Whether it is a big plus in a small studio in the US, or it's better to focus on one thing in my career. I think what you're trying to ask is, what's better, a generalist or focusing on one discipline? Can't answer that for you, because the answer is whatever works for you. Like whatever your passion is what you should follow. At Lucas, when I was at Lucas, I worked on a lot of different aspects of the pipeline. I was a modeler, I was a texture artist, I even did a little bit of setup, did cutscenes, and animation, obviously, and game design. So I wore a lot of different hats, which to me I found very rewarding, because I learned so much. I kind of learned the pipe, so I knew how to be the best, sort of how to really do my work cleanly, so that the next department wasn't suffering based on maybe, as an example, if I was animating and I knew the next level in the pipeline was lighting or something like that, I would make sure that my keys were clean, like my arcs were clean, so that, excuse me, when they opened it up in the lighting department, that the file wasn't so overwhelmingly large, or there wasn't extraneous stuff, you know, like a dirty file is what we would call it, so that they'd be able to manage it on their end. So in that aspect, being a generalist was very rewarding. I learned a ton, but I was really passionate about animation, and so I decided to start focusing on that. And again, that was super, extremely rewarding, but then you start to tend to miss being able to contribute to other parts of the pipeline. So it comes back to my original answer, which is whatever is right for you, whatever you feel is something that is going to be rewarding for you, that's what you should follow, that's what you should pursue. So it's really, it depends on the person. Let's see. What is the demand on labor market in the animation and related professions? Whether willingly to go to the studio to attract people from abroad. Well, I think what you're asking with that question is, are larger studios willing to relocate people, or do they look abroad to bring people onto a studio, or are they just looking within the States to kind of hire people? My answer to that is studios look for the best people. End of story. Like, especially larger studios. So they are very willing to relocate people. If they find an amazing animator that lives in Paris, then they're gonna find a way to get a visa and get them over to the US to work there. I assume it's vice versa. I mean, I don't work in another country, but I would assume that if there's another country that really is interested in an animator that's from the States, that they would also recruit them. So it really isn't about necessarily where you are, it's about the skill level of your work. Now, having said that, though, I do think there is a lot more opportunity for animators and artists who live where the work is, because excuse me, oftentimes I have found, especially in smaller studios, that when they need an animator or an artist, they usually need them like right then and there. And so it'll benefit you, and you'll have maybe more opportunities open up to you if you're where the job is. Because say they needed someone today, if you lived here here in LA and a studio needed you right now, they'd be more willing to, you know, take a chance on you. Again, that's difficult when you do need a visa and in order to come into the country. So if that's the case, then I would really focus on just creating a really strong demo reel and being a really strong and talented animator. That's really the key to it right there. Do you use Maya scripts in your animation process, like Twin Machine or something other? You know, I used to use, the thing is when you go to a larger studio, they already have all this, you know, in-house tools that already exist. When I'm working in Maya, I tend to use the grease pencil tool a lot to draw over my work and kind of push poses and even adjust my timing by just drawing something out. And I'm not an illustrator, and I'm not a 2D animator by any stretch of the imagination, but you don't have to be. Like in our field, it's movement, it's motion that you have to understand. So as long as, I mean, you can draw, you know, a snail, you can draw them by just, you know, one circle. So in Turbo, all you needed to do is circle, you know, and maybe like a little worm head and eyes in order to just sort of shorthand the character. And you just animate that in a quick, sort of rough way, and then there's your blueprint. So I'd use that a lot when it came to Maya, tools like that. But for the most part, it just depends on the show as well. So there's no tricks. It's just hard work. I wish I could give you a script that can make your animation amazing. I would use it every day. Does your animation course cover strong posing? Yes, it does. We actually focus a lot on that. It's one of the first assignments that you'll get. One of the first assignments you're not even moving the character. We discuss and talk about the importance of creating one really strong pose in order to describe or explain an animation. And so my class is really centered around that, because strong posing is, again, another one of the foundations behind creating a strong reel, right, or a strong animation. Now, before I answer a couple of other questions, I'm going to go ahead and just show my demo reel, because I guess I forgot to do that at the beginning. But I'll do that, and maybe that'll open up maybe a few more questions, and it'll give me a chance to kind of drink a little bit of water. So if that's cool, Vadim, we'll do that. I'll assume that's a yes. All right, let me try and share my screen here. And I'll play my demo reel.
Astrid, where did Toothless go?
I don't know.
I'm in the Indy 500. The Indy 500? What are you talking about?
What is he talking about?
Now look, I know it may sound a little crazy. No, Tito. That doesn't sound crazy.
I'm talking about Masters Ox and Croc. They're in Home Men Jail on Black Dragon Alley.
What? They're still alive? They must be in that jail gathering intelligence, hatching a plot to use their awesomeness to defeat the weapon. Well, we definitely know that we shouldn't blast them with this scanner. Oh, I definitely just blasted you with this scanner. I love this thing.
Actually, Astrid might be onto something.
Easy for you to say. Your drug ain't going anywhere without you.
Must be nice. Where's Paul?
How come you lose a guy that big?
Where did you get all this stuff?
It doesn't belong to me.
You. I'm sorry, sir. No more inventing.
Welcome, America. I'm Sam Sparks. Hello, America. Sam Sparks here. America, hi. I didn't see you there. It's me, Sam Sparks.
Anyway.
Into slack-jawed walking veg.
Alrighty, so you're not seeing my screen. Let's see if we can fix that. Okay, I will share my screen then. Sorry about that. Okay, let's try this. Okay, I am starting it new. Please let me know if this is working.
Astrid, where did Toothless go?
I don't know.
I'm in the Indy 500. The Indy 500? What are you talking about?
What is he talking about?
Now look, I know it may sound a little crazy.
No, Tito. That doesn't sound crazy.
I'm talking about Masters Ox and Croc. They're in Home Men Jail on Black Dragon Valley.
What? They're still alive? You must be in that jail gathering intelligence, hatching a plot to use their awesomeness to defeat the weapon. Well, we definitely know that we shouldn't blast them with this scanner.
Oh, I definitely just blasted you with this scanner. I love this thing.
Actually, Astrid might be honest.
Easy for you to say. Your drug ain't going anywhere without you.
Must be nice.
Where's Paul?
How come you lose a guy that big?
Where did you get all this stuff?
It doesn't belong to me.
You. I'm sorry, sir. No more inventing.
Welcome, America. I'm Sam Sparks. Hello, America. Sam Sparks here. America, hi. I didn't see you there. It's me, Sam Sparks.
Anyway.
Into slack-jawed walking veg. Let go, you monster!
A snail in the Indy 500.
Oh, no, not me. It's not safe to speak here.
Right.
And even if they did, you wouldn't survive one lap.
Yeah, but
I was back in Guatemala. I came here for a better life. Pretty great decision, eh?
Whoa! Don't do this, Dave. We can run right through the store.
New costume design, see?
Costume design?
You need a brain, so you get a little brain wearing glasses on your costume or something. And since I'm the cool one, I'd have like 2 tanks, sword.
One villain in the city, and that's me. I certainly don't need a partner.
time to go.
I forgot the pickle.
Alrighty, so that was my reel. I forgot to show it earlier. Sweet. So we'll continue with the questions. Hopefully that might open up a few more questions. Apologize for the technical difficulties at the beginning there. I'm sure it was weird, probably watching a bunch of screens. Anyway, we'll move on to your questions. Let's take a look. Okay. So what is your process or workflow of animation? Do you block in step? Do you block in plus? Do you block and pose your characters while also creating rough timing? Or do you block in any frames and timing all timing after all poses are done. What else is your animation process? Well, another good question, and I'm going to give you sort of a cop-out answer in the sense that every animator animates completely differently. I've not met 2 animators who animate exactly the same yet in my career. And I think that's just because everyone's different. So I can give you my process, and it does not mean that that's the right way of doing it. It doesn't mean it's the wrong way of doing it. It just means that's sort of the process I've developed through all the years of animating that works for me in a production environment, especially where you have quick turnaround and you have to show your work quickly in order to get an assignment done by the end of the week, for example. Every shot is a little bit different, but for the most part, and if you take my course, I do walk through that part of it and in more detail. So I'll give you sort of an overview here, but if you want to know more detail, you can always take the class and be able to really, you know, look over my shoulder almost on exactly how I do things. But for the most part, when I do get a shot, I start off by really thinking about the shot. I'll spend like a couple of hours just thinking about it and talking to my supervisor about it. By that point, you'll have been pitched the shot from the director. I think about it in the context of the film as well, and sort of try and come up with an idea that I want to pursue. Then I will shoot reference. I'll shoot different types of reference. I might actually talk to other animators to help me shoot reference. So, for example, if I was animating Hiccup on How to Train Your Dragon, I'd actually talk to the supervisor on that character, and we almost had certain animators that we'd go to for video reference, which were people who had sort of the same build as the character and personality as the character. So instead of trying to pretend I was Hiccup, I'd actually get, you know, an animator that resembled that, and his name was Jakob. He was actually the supervisor on the character, and I'd have him record reference. So in that respect, that's what I would do on that shot. And a lot of the other shots that were Astrid, for example, that other animators were animating, they'd ask me for reference because it's much easier to kind of tap a female on the shoulder and say, you know, can you act like a female? Because there'll be certain mannerisms and things that a female in real life would actually do as opposed to a male pretending to be a female. So that's another thing I talk about in class as well, to try and create authentic reference, not just, you know, not sort of fake reference, like where you're trying to force something. Try and create it in a believable way, which means casting people to do your reference that actually resemble the characters that you're trying to animate. Anyway, so that's where I start a shot. I show my shot or show the reference to my supervisor, sometimes the director, if they're interested in seeing it, and that gives me a nice sort of basic blueprint to guide myself. I'll take my video reference and then I try and dissect it. So I try and look for the main keys that describe what's happening in the action or in the performance, and then I go into whatever software, Maya or whatever proprietary software in the studio, and I keyframe it. So I'll just grab the keys from my video reference and place them sort of verbatim, like what those poses are, into the model. Then I'll do that for, like, you know, the whole shot, and just block it out in steps. Then again, I show that, get some more feedback, and that includes like facial blocking, things like that. I'll show that and then get some notes and then go back and then readjust it at that point. And that's probably when I start adjusting my timing. I've always found that when you shoot reference on video, when you apply it in like a software program, it always feels slower than what it did when you shot the reference. So I try and sort of retime the whole thing, like to just be a little bit faster, and I find that to give it a little bit more, it gives it a little more life. So then on top of that, that's when I start breaking it down to, now I have my main keys, then I'll add my breakdowns, and then switch over to spline, and then continue sort of refining it. And then I use my video reference. At that point, I sort of don't look at my video reference anymore. I just push the animation I have in front of me. So if a character is sitting down, I just try and push that specific pose as far as I can. And the way I do that is I show it to my fellow animators, my supervising animator, and just get notes, get a lot of notes, and see what's working, see what's not working, where I can push it, and where I can pull it back. And then the final pass, once a director approves it, is really polishing, is really adding the small nuances, things like, you know, when a character smiles, like you'll add the smile in the eyes, you'll add the smile in the eyebrows, you'll add even a smile like, you know, when you like are shocked or like have this expression, you'll even see your scalp move, you'll have ears move. So that minutia type of acting or performance or keying on a model is what I do sort of at the very end in the polish phase. And the polish phase is probably the most tedious and longest of the phases. So that's my process in a short few minutes. Let's see. Someone asked about motion capture. Is it to compete with animators, or is it a tool that helps animators? Does an animator need to know how to work with mocap? Well, I think there's a time and place for everything. And I think for mocap, it's definitely a tool. It's a tool like any other tool that we use, any other, you know, digital tool for a filmmaker to tell a story. Motion capture can get them there a little quicker than just using an animator would. So in that sense, I don't think it's competing with an animator, because I still don't think that motion capture software is the equivalent of what an animator, like a live human being, can give you in, you know, in the work. And a live person actually adds that life, that part of it that isn't rotoscoped, right? You're adding your own timing, you're pushing things, you're pushing poses, things that wouldn't necessarily live in real life. And when you mocap something, it's literally the movement of a character, right? It's not going any more exaggerated than what the movement of whatever actor performed it. So there is a time and place. I don't think the two compete. I think there are places where you use mocap and it's fantastic to tell stories. And then there's other times where you need a human person, an animator, to push the medium and to tell the story. So both can live in the same world, is I guess the way I look at it. Let's see. Okay. I think there's one more question, so we'll probably end on this, which is a really good question to end on, actually. Actually. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. I'll answer 1 and 2. Where did you get your nice Cartoony t-shirt? Good question. Well, this is actually from Zootopia, the movie my husband, who happens to be David Stadolny, is working on. So he's at Disney, and this is a nice t-shirt he happened to get for me at work, and I think it's super cool, so I wanted to wear it today. You can't get it anywhere because obviously the movie isn't even out yet, but stay tuned. It'll be out in March, so keep an eye out. And then we'll end with this one question. How do you balance your animation studies, later animation work, and family life? As a student, it's really, really hard to balance the two. I remember as a student, I didn't have quite as much going on in the sense of now I'm married, I have kids, you know, a house. Like there's certain aspects and responsibilities that you need to perform on top of your animation job. As a student, I didn't have all that going on, so I could focus on, for example, working all night on an animation. Yes, that sort of it sort of puts a damper on your private life, on activities outside of that. All I can say is that that time that you're in school is meant to be focused on this, because the more time you dedicate to that study while you're a student, the better off you'll be when you graduate. You know, the better setup, the better opportunities you'll have. So early on, the balance is sort of tipped on the really focusing on schoolwork. So if there's a party, you know, on Friday night, or you're working on an animation that's due on Sunday, I would end up staying home to work on my animation, and I knew there's going to be a party next week, you know. I wouldn't completely neglect my friends, so it is important to sort of have a life and get outside of the computer. So it really is to each person. It's sort of an individual sort of decision on what would balance you out. I think whenever I just felt like I wasn't motivated, or my work just sort of hit a wall, like I wasn't really giving it my all or putting my heart into it, you're sort of drained. At that point was when I would tell myself, okay, you need to take a break. Maybe it's time to just go to the beach, or, you know, hang out with some friends, or go to that party instead of focusing on staying home and animating. And then as a professional, again, it's, as a professional, the one thing I've noticed is that in order to keep that work, home, family life balance, when I'm at work 110%. I focus on that time frame, you know, from 9 to 7 or whatever that time is that I'm at work, on just doing my work, focusing, so that what before I would kind of meander, you know, and go have a coffee break, or let's talk to this guy, or let me send a few emails, or let me check Facebook. Those things I stop doing, and I just focus on the work I need to do and interacting with my coworkers and making that the best as possible, so that it can set me up to, you know, come 7 o'clock or whatever time, you know, I'm leaving work, I could leave, and I could feel like I did everything I needed to do that day, and I can go home with a clear conscience, go home, be able to spend time with my family, and not have to be like, oh, shoot, I didn't, you know, get that shot where it needed to be. So I decided to cut out the extraneous long lunches or breaks, things like that. I still keep my lunch hour and talk to people, but it's much more regimented. I focus on what I need to do at work when I'm at work, and I try not to fool around and kind of half-ass things, because then that's just going to add up during the week, and then it's going to take away from my home life. So I think of it that way. That one never changes. It's always a constant battle, and it's different on every production and in every studio, because your hours may vary and your production may vary on, you know, the pressure they put on you. So to each person, it's a little bit different. That's sort of how I deal with it. All right. So I think that's sort of the end of our presentation here, our Q&A. It was awesome getting to chat and share with you guys and answer some questions. Hopefully, if you have any other questions or want to keep in touch, I'm on Twitter. You can find me at reblink.com. Let's see if I can write that out for you. Also, you can always email me at CGTarian. It's rebecca.perez@cgtarian.com. Let me write this one out for you. Here's my Twitter. Hopefully that works. Oh, it's probably backwards for everybody. Oh, shoot. Let's see if I can write that backwards. That would kind of be cool, huh? Let's see. I think it might be. It might work. This would be kind of cool if it actually works. Look at that. It worked. I actually wrote backwards. So that's my Twitter account. Feel free to add me. I'm always updating with new information and new images and info from work and the industry. And my email, again, rebecca.perez@CGTarian.com. It's awesome talking to you guys. It's always great sharing information. And if you have any other questions, just shoot me an email. All right. Talk to you soon. Take care.